He used to tell me that growing old together would be the best adventure of our lives. I believed him, right up until the night I discovered something that made me realize we were never even walking in the same direction. There's a kind of heartbreak that doesn't start with shouting. It starts in silence, the kind where you're lying next to someone you love and suddenly feel like you're in a stranger's bed. That was the moment I knew something was wrong, even before I could name what it was. Let's say his name was Mark, my boyfriend, my almost forever. The man who made promises like prayers, soft, certain, and meant to last a lifetime. He wasn't the kind who swept you off your feet. He was the kind who made you believe you'd finally found solid ground. Reliable, predictable, the one you could build a future with. We met when I was 25, too old for fairy tales, but still young enough to think forever was something you could earn through loyalty. He was the calm one, the steady one, the one who always said, "Don't worry, I've got us." And he did, until he didn't. For 6 years, we built what looked like a life. A shared apartment with creaking floors and plants that somehow survived both of our neglect. Photos from road trips pinned to the fridge. The same brand of coffee always in the cupboard. Small, ordinary things that I mistook for proof of permanence. Our love wasn't perfect, but it was familiar. The kind of love that felt like habit wrapped in comfort. We talked about marriage casually, like it was already inevitable. We'd point at old couples in parks and say, "That'll be us one day." I think part of me stopped questioning things after that, as if the promise itself was enough to guarantee the ending. But promises can decay quietly, long before you notice the rot. The first sign was small. He started spending more time on his phone, smiling at messages he never explained. I remember asking once, half jokingly, "Who's keeping you so entertained?" He'd grin, say, "Work stuff," and kiss my forehead like punctuation at the end of a lie I didn't yet recognize. I told myself it didn't matter. He was trustworthy. He'd proven that over and over, hadn't he? Except proof is a tricky thing. It expires the moment you stop verifying it. Some nights he'd stay up late in the living room, claiming he couldn't sleep. I'd hear him typing softly, the glow of his screen cutting through the dark. "Emails," he'd say when I asked. "Just catching up." And I'd roll over, pretending not to notice the flicker of blue light under the door. Denial is a language love teaches you fluently. And then came the distance. Slow, invisible, polite. His hugs lingered less. His words grew lighter, like he was talking to someone else, even when his eyes were on me. He stopped asking about my day, but still said, "I love you," out of muscle memory. I told myself it was stress, that forever just had quiet seasons. Until one night, forever broke without sound. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't a confession. It was something small, stupid, almost accidental. One of those ordinary moments that splits your reality clean in half. I don't remember exactly what time it was when I found it, but I remember the cold, the kind that starts inside your stomach and spreads until your hands tremble. The world didn't tilt or crash. It just shifted. One click, one glance, one truth, too simple to ignore. I sat there in the dark, staring at that quiet piece of proof, and realized how absurdly fragile trust is, how it can survive years of storms but shatter under a whisper. By the time the sun rose, I was still sitting in the same spot, numb and awake. Mark came into the kitchen like nothing had happened, hair messy, smiling like an ordinary man on an ordinary morning. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, warm and familiar. "Did you sleep?" he asked. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The words felt dangerous. He kissed my cheek, poured coffee into my mug, and told me about his plans for the day, all while standing in the ruins of what we used to be. And I just watched him, trying to memorize that moment, the morning before he realized that the woman standing across from him already knew everything. Because sometimes the cruelest part of betrayal isn't the act itself. It's the calm before the storm, when the liar still believes you're blind and you're too broken to tell them you've already seen. The hours after finding out were the longest of my life. Morning light slid across the walls like nothing had changed, but everything inside me had shifted. I moved through the apartment quietly, like a ghost haunting a place she used to call home. Every sound felt too loud. The kettle boiling, the clink of a spoon against porcelain, the steady rhythm of his voice humming a song under his breath from the bedroom. He came out smiling, hair still damp from the shower, smelling like my favorite soap. I'd bought it for him on our anniversary. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, pressed his lips to my neck, and whispered, "You're quiet this morning." I almost laughed. Quiet didn't begin to cover it. I told him I hadn't slept well. It was true, though well wasn't the problem. Bad dreams, I said. Another truth, just not the one he thought. He poured his coffee, reached for the newspaper, and leaned against the counter. The sunlight caught his face perfectly, the same soft features I used to think I'd wake up next to for decades. Now every detail looked like evidence. He started talking about weekend plans, brunch with friends, a movie, maybe a walk by the river. His voice was steady, easy, certain. I studied him while he talked, memorizing the tone of a man still living in his lie. It was almost impressive, the way he didn't flinch, the way he built sentences over the ruins of what he'd done. When he finally looked up, his eyes were warm, familiar, loving. "You okay?" he asked. "Of course," I said, forcing a smile. "Just tired." That was my first lie of the morning, a small, necessary shield. He kissed me goodbye and left for work, and the door clicked shut behind him. The second it did, my legs gave out. I slid down to the kitchen floor, coffee still steaming on the counter above me. It was the first time I let the reality sink in. He wasn't just unfaithful. He was practicing faithfulness while living a double life. I sat there until the clock struck 9. The city outside went on. Footsteps, car horns, people laughing as if the world hadn't just shifted. It felt cruel, how ordinary everything remained while my trust turned to ash. Eventually, I stood up, rinsed my cup, and started cleaning. It wasn't about tidiness. It was about control. The counters, the shelves, the floors, all spotless. I couldn't fix my life, but I could make the kitchen gleam. Later, I opened his laptop. My hands shook, not from anger but from knowing. I didn't need more proof. I already had it. But humans are strange. We chase confirmation even when the truth is already cutting us open. His browser was still logged in. The same dating app. New messages. New matches. "Great smile," one woman had written. "You seem real." He'd replied, "I try to be." The words blurred on the screen. I closed the laptop gently, as if slamming it would make me complicit in the chaos. That afternoon, I walked to the park near our apartment, the one where we'd had picnics every summer. Families passed by, kids screaming with laughter, couples holding hands. It all looked so sincere it made my stomach ache. I sat on our favorite bench and stared at the empty space beside me, remembering how he once promised we'd sit here with gray hair and matching thermoses, still laughing at the same stupid jokes. Funny how people can plan a lifetime with you while simultaneously searching for a replacement. By the time I got home, his jacket was already hanging on the chair. He'd returned early. I froze in the doorway, watching him from a distance. He looked up, smiled like nothing had happened, and said, "You look tired." I wanted to scream, "You have no idea." Instead, I nodded, hung up my coat, and walked past him. Dinner that night was quiet. Too quiet. He talked about work. I pretended to listen. Every word felt like static, meaningless noise, spilling into a room that no longer belonged to either of us. When he reached across the table to hold my hand, I didn't pull away. Not yet. I just watched his fingers brush against mine and thought, "You really think I don't know?" And in that moment, I decided something simple but irreversible. I wasn't going to confront him in anger. I was going to let him bury himself in his own lies first, because nothing exposes deceit faster than watching someone get comfortable inside it. So I smiled, squeezed his hand, and said softly, "I'm fine." But inside, I was already building the ending. It's funny how love stories never warn you about the quiet kind of danger, the one that hides in predictability, the one that feels safe right up until the moment it isn't. When I met Mark, everything about him radiated stability. The kind of man who remembered to water his plants, paid his bills on time, held doors open, even when you were still 10 steps away. He wasn't the type to sweep you off your feet. He was the type to make you feel like you could stop running. And after years of dating men who treated emotions like optional accessories, that steadiness felt like relief. We met through mutual friends at a small dinner party, one of those evenings filled with wine, laughter, and polite strangers trying not to talk about work. He was across the table, quiet at first, but when he did speak, everyone leaned in. There was something magnetic about how calmly he carried himself, how he made space for everyone else to talk. When he asked for my number, I didn't expect to hear from him, but he called the next day. Not a text, not a lazy hey, a call. His voice was low, careful, deliberate. "I'd like to see you again," he said, and just like that, something inside me believed him. Our first date wasn't cinematic. No grand gestures, no fireworks. Just coffee, rain tapping against the windows, his hand resting close enough to mine to feel the heat without touch. He listened. Really listened. And that was enough. I remember thinking, this is what grown-up love feels like. The months that followed felt effortless. He was attentive without being overbearing, funny without trying too hard, affectionate in small, consistent ways that made me feel chosen. He'd send texts like, "Drive safe," or "Don't forget your umbrella," tiny things that built a picture of someone who cared about the details of my existence. He met my friends. They adored him. "You hit the jackpot," they said, and I agreed. He was kind, reliable, unshakable. We talked about books, travel, the future, topics that made it easy to imagine decades ahead. He told me he wanted a love that aged well. The kind where you wake up next to the same person every day and still feel lucky, he said once, tracing circles on my palm. I believed him because he said it so softly, so sincerely, that doubting it felt cynical. We moved in together after 2 years. Our place was small but warm. Pale walls, mismatched furniture, a balcony that overlooked the park. We spent Sunday mornings reading in silence, our knees touching under the blanket. I'd catch him glancing at me sometimes, smiling like he'd just realized something good. "I hope we never get tired of this," he'd say. That's the thing about lies. They don't always start as lies. Sometimes they're just promises that rot slowly, covered in charm. The first time I noticed a crack, it was so small I almost ignored it. He came home late, distracted, eyes glazed over with exhaustion. I asked if everything was okay. "Just work," he said, without looking at me. Then he kissed me, and the conversation ended. Simple, routine, but his kiss felt different. Not colder, just distracted, like his mind was somewhere else entirely. After that, there were more cracks, missed dinners, shorter replies, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He started checking his phone more often, always turning it slightly away when I walked by. Nothing overt, nothing dramatic. Just 100 small gestures that whispered what he'd never dare to say out loud. I told myself it was stress. I even tried to fix it. Cooking his favorite meals, leaving little notes on the fridge, asking if he wanted a weekend away. He'd always smile and say, "You're amazing. I'm just tired." And that was the thing. He never stopped being kind. He never stopped saying the right words. He just stopped meaning them. I remember one evening vividly. We were watching an old movie, one of those quiet, romantic ones, where two people grow old together. He rested his head against mine and whispered, "That'll be us someday." It should have felt comforting. Instead, it filled me with a strange, unexplainable sadness. Because deep down, something in me already knew someday wasn't coming. But I didn't listen to that voice. I kept telling myself that love meant trust, that we were fine, that people like Mark didn't do things like that. It's incredible how much denial you can fit into a single heart. Looking back now, I realize that the betrayal didn't begin when I found his profile. It began the moment I started explaining away the feeling that something was wrong. The moment I mistook his composure for loyalty. Because when someone's too perfect for too long, you stop noticing that they've stopped showing up. And by the time I finally did, it was already too late. If I'm honest, The unraveling didn't start with one big lie. It started with distance so quiet you could mistake it for peace. There was a time when we couldn't go an hour without texting each other. Little messages about lunch, traffic, a song that reminded him of me. Then one day I realized I'd gone the entire morning without hearing from him. It didn't bother me at first. People get busy, right? But then the next day it happened again and again, until silence became the new normal. When I finally mentioned it, he smiled that calm, unbothered smile I used to love. "You worry too much," he said. "I'm still here." And he was. Physically, his jacket still hung by the door, his toothbrush still sat next to mine, his arm still held me at night, but his presence had changed texture. It felt like hugging a photograph of a man I used to know. The late nights began after that. Work dinners, client meetings, deadlines. He always had a reason, and I always accepted it because the alternative that he was choosing to be elsewhere felt too painful to consider. I tried to hold us together the way people do when they don't know they're already letting go. I made dinner, lit candles, sent him playlists of songs that used to be ours. He'd thank me, smile, kiss my forehead, and then drift back into whatever world he was living in behind his phone screen. There was one night that still replays in my mind like a warning. We were watching TV, something mindless, comforting. His head was on my lap, his phone glowing against the dim light of the room. I caught a glimpse of the reflection in the window, his face lit up by the screen, smiling faintly. That same smile he used to give me, but it wasn't for me anymore. I asked what was funny. He locked his phone. Nothing. Then he looked up at me with those steady eyes, so practiced, so calm, and said, "You're imagining things." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. So I nodded, smiled back, and told myself I was overreacting. That's what love does. It turns intuition into guilt. Weeks passed. We kept up the routines. Dinners, errands, family visits. We looked fine. We sounded fine. But our conversations had shrunk to logistics, schedules, groceries, bills. The tenderness had thinned out until it was barely visible. When I'd reach for his hand, sometimes he'd squeeze back. Other times he'd just let mine rest there, limp, distracted. Those were the nights I'd lie awake beside him, tracing the outline of his shoulder in the dark, trying to remember when love stopped feeling mutual. It's strange. When someone starts lying to you, the truth doesn't vanish right away. It lingers like a shadow, waiting to be noticed. I noticed, over and over, and kept choosing blindness. There was one afternoon in particular, an ordinary Sunday. I came home early from running errands, grocery bags still in my hands. I heard his voice before I saw him, low, careful, a tone he didn't use with me anymore. I stepped closer to the bedroom door and caught the end of his sentence. "No, she doesn't suspect anything." He must have heard me drop my keys, because the conversation ended instantly. By the time I walked in, he was sitting on the bed, phone face down. "Who were you talking to?" I asked. He looked up, calm as ever. "Work? Why?" "Work calls you baby now?" A pause, just a fraction of one, then the smallest smile. "You must have misheard." It was such a simple lie, elegant in its cruelty, because he knew I wouldn't push further, not then. That's when something inside me changed. I stopped trying to save him, stopped trying to explain away the unease. Instead, I started collecting moments, every deflection, every sudden laugh at his phone, every new habit he couldn't explain. I became quiet, deliberate, an observer. He must have sensed the shift, because one night, he wrapped his arms around me and said, "You're not yourself lately." "I could say the same about you," I replied. He didn't answer. He just kissed me, soft and empty, and for the first time, I didn't kiss him back. I remember thinking that maybe every relationship dies twice, once when love fades, and again when denial does. By the time I stumbled onto the truth, the evidence wasn't a surprise. It was just confirmation, a name, a face, a profile that told the world he was looking for something real. The irony still stings. I'd spent years offering him exactly that. But in the end, what destroyed us wasn't the profile itself. It was the realization that he'd been living a double life long before I ever found proof. He was already gone. I just hadn't caught up yet. Knowing the truth changes the air around you. Every word he said after that night sounded warped, like a recording slightly out of sync with reality. I could hear the delay between his voice and the person he pretended to be. I didn't tell him what I'd seen. Not yet. There's a kind of power in silence, in watching a liar reveal himself without realizing you're already watching. So I let him perform. He still kissed me goodbye in the mornings, still texted home soon at the end of each workday. But every time my phone buzzed with his name, the sweetness of it tasted bitter. His messages read like lines from a script he'd forgotten I'd already read the ending to. That week I studied him the way you study a stranger who looks familiar. Every movement, every hesitation, every small contradiction. When he scrolled through his phone on the couch, I paid attention to how quickly he switched screens when I walked past. When he smiled at something invisible, I memorized the angle of it, the way it didn't quite reach his eyes anymore. He'd glance up and catch me looking. "What?" he'd ask. "Nothing," I'd say. "Just thinking." He never pressed. He didn't want to know what I was thinking. The distance between us became its own kind of language. We still laughed sometimes. The rehearsed kind of laughter couples use when guests are around. We still had dinner, still exchanged small talk. But every sentence felt like a placeholder, a way to pass time until one of us finally said what we both knew. The first test came on a Wednesday night. He came home late, jacket damp from the rain, eyes wide with practiced exhaustion. I asked how his evening was. "Long," he said, loosening his tie. "Client meeting ran over." "Which client?" I asked. He blinked, just once, too slowly. You wouldn't know them. It was such a small crack, but once you've seen one, you can't stop seeing all the others. He showered while I sat on the bed, the sound of running water filling the room. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. Once, twice, 3 times. I didn't reach for it. I didn't have to. The reflection in the mirror showed the screen lighting up. New message. "You have a match." I almost laughed. It was so absurd, it felt scripted. When he came out, I was already under the covers, pretending to sleep. He slipped in beside me, damp hair brushing my shoulder. His hand rested against my hip. Light, habitual, meaningless. I kept my breathing steady. He whispered, "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me." I wanted to ask which version of him believed that. Instead, I whispered back, "I know." The next morning, I woke before him and watched the early light slide across his face. He looked peaceful, boyish even. It's cruel how calm people can look while you're silently mourning them. That day, I made a decision. I wasn't going to scream, accuse, or beg for truth. I was going to let him drown in his own performance until he couldn't keep track of which audience he was playing for. So I smiled more than usual. I asked about his day. I touched his arm when I spoke. I became the version of myself he thought he still had, the version he could betray without consequence. And as I did, he relaxed. He started humming again, whistling in the shower, leaving his phone unattended a little too long. That's when I started collecting my own receipts, screenshots, timestamps, everything he'd hidden in plain sight. It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was clarity. I needed to see exactly how deep the lie went. A few days later, the proof landed in my inbox. A friend, the same one who'd accidentally shown me his profile, had sent me screenshots. Different username, same photo, same smirk. Bio, looking for something real. I stared at the screen for a long time, then closed it slowly, like shutting a coffin. That evening, when he walked through the door, I greeted him with a smile so convincing it scared me. He kissed me, tasted like mint and someone else's perfume. "Rough day?" he asked. "The usual," I said. "Dinner's ready." He smiled, oblivious. "You always take care of me." "I know," I said. And as I poured wine into his glass, I finally understood why betrayal is so quiet before it explodes. Because the liar still thinks he's safe, and you've already stopped pretending he matters. I wasn't going to warn him this time. I was going to let the truth arrive on its own, loud, undeniable, and far too late to save him. Once you know someone's lying, every normal thing they do looks suspicious. Every text, every touch, every laugh becomes a performance you can't unsee. The next few days, I lived in that unbearable middle ground, the one between pretending and exposing. He was still acting like everything was fine. I was acting like I believed him. Two liars under one roof, one conscious, one blissfully unaware. He started talking more about the future again. It was almost cruel, the way he leaned into the illusion. "I've been thinking about taking a trip this summer," he said one night over dinner. "Just you and me. Somewhere quiet." I smiled. "That sounds nice." He smiled back, relieved, maybe proud of himself. "See, that's what I love about us. We always find our way back." His words landed like a joke I didn't laugh at. I just nodded, wondering if he practiced those lines before coming home. That night, I decided to test him. I wanted to see how far he'd go to protect his lie. He was sitting on the couch scrolling through his phone, the glow reflecting in his eyes. "Who are you talking to?" I asked, casually sipping my tea. He didn't even flinch. "Work group chat, deadlines, you know." "Can I see?" He looked up, caught off guard. "Why?" "I don't know. Curiosity?" I smiled. There was a split second, one breath, where he hesitated. Then he laughed it off, turned his screen toward me, showing a random chat with coworkers. He planned ahead. A decoy. Smart. I pretended to be satisfied. "See?" he said, smiling too easily. "Still the same boring guy you fell for." "Yeah," I said softly. "Exactly the same." But he'd forgotten one thing. Patterns. He always kept his phone face up when he had nothing to hide. That night, it was face down again before he went to shower. When I picked it up, the screen flashed a notification before it locked. "You have a new message." From the same app, same icon, the same lie wearing a new face. I set it down carefully, almost reverently, as if it were something fragile. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I already knew. He came out of the bathroom humming, towel around his waist, steam still clinging to his skin. "You okay?" he asked, drying his hair. "Fine," I said, smiling faintly, "just thinking." "About what?" "About us." He stopped humming. "Good thoughts, I hope?" "The best," I said. "You always give me something to think about." He chuckled, unaware that his world was already tilting. Later that night, I watched him sleep. His face looked peaceful, almost innocent, and I hated that for a moment it still made my heart ache. That's the cruelty of love. It doesn't vanish with truth. It lingers like a bad echo. The next morning, I went for a walk before sunrise. The city was quiet, half awake, and I thought about all the little signs I'd ignored, the lies disguised as routines, the I love yous that had turned mechanical. I realized I'd been living in a house built from promises that had already expired. By the time I returned, he was making breakfast. He looked up, grinning like nothing could touch him. "Early start?" "Yeah," I said. "Needed some air." He kissed my cheek and slid a plate toward me. "You worry too much," he said softly. "I don't think I worry enough," I replied. He frowned, confused, then laughed it off. I spent that whole day watching him, his small gestures, his careless confidence. How easy it must have been for him to move between versions of himself. The loyal partner, the charming stranger online, the man who thought he could promise forever while window shopping for alternatives. That evening, he said he was meeting a friend. I smiled, kissed him goodbye, and waited exactly 15 minutes before opening my laptop. It didn't take long to find him. Different username again, same photos, same smile, online, active now. I watched his status flicker from green to gray to green again, like the heartbeat of a man who still thought he was safe. And in that moment, I decided that if he wanted to play games, I'd stop being the spectator. So I made a plan. Simple, precise, inevitable. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to show him what it felt like to finally be seen. It started on a Thursday, the day I decided to stop being a background character in his performance. By then, I'd already memorized his routines, the time he left for work, the exact hour he checked his phone after dinner, the way his voice softened when he lied. He didn't realize how predictable he'd become, how easy it was to read him once I stopped looking through love and started looking through truth. That evening, I asked if he wanted to go out dinner, maybe the new movie we'd been talking about for weeks. He hesitated, then smiled, "I can't tonight. The guys are grabbing drinks." Quote, "The guys," I repeated, pretending to search my memory. "Which ones?" He laughed. "You don't know them. It's just work friends." I nodded slowly. "Right, work friends." He didn't catch the edge in my tone. He never did. That was his weakness. He mistook calm for blindness. He left around 7, wearing the same cologne I used to love, the one that had started to smell like someone else. The door shut behind him, and the moment it did, the quiet wrapped around me like armor. I sat down at the table, opened my laptop, and logged into the same dating app I'd found his profile on. My hands didn't shake. I wasn't nervous. I was methodical. New account. New name. New photo. Nothing revealing, just enough to seem real. I searched his username. It didn't take long. There he was. Online. Active now. His bio still the same. Looking for something real. I stared at the words for a long time, then typed. Funny. I thought real people didn't need to lie about who they are. Then I hit send. The message went through instantly. I watched the 3 dots appear, then disappear, reappear, disappear again. My pulse was steady, my breathing controlled. I waited. Then his reply came. "Who is this?" I smiled. "Someone who believed in forever." The dots appeared again. I could almost picture his face, the flicker of confusion, the tightening of his jaw, the first hint of panic breaking through his calm. "Is this supposed to be a joke?" "No," I typed. "Just a reminder." He went offline. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. His name lit up the screen. I didn't answer. Then came the texts. "Where are you? We need to talk. This isn't what you think." The last one made me laugh out loud. The universal anthem of liars everywhere. When he came home that night, he moved differently. Fast, jittery, eyes searching the room like he expected to see evidence of himself somewhere. "We need to talk," he said again, voice sharp now, stripped of warmth. I leaned against the counter, calm. "About what?" "You know what? Someone sent me a message." "Oh?" I tilted my head. "Something real?" He froze. The silence stretched, heavy and brittle. "You shouldn't have done that." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean I shouldn't have caught you?" He exhaled hard, rubbing his temples. "It's not what it looks like." "It never is," I said. He took a step toward me. "I was just curious, bored, practicing for your next forever." "Don't twist this," he snapped. "You don't understand." I laughed softly, shaking my head. "That's the part that always gets me. You cheat, you lie, you gaslight. And still, somehow, I'm the one who doesn't understand." His jaw tightened. "We've been together for years. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" "It used to," I said. "Before I realized that the person I loved wasn't even real." He flinched like I'd hit him. "I made a mistake." "No," I said. "You made a choice." For a long time, neither of us moved. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. His breathing was uneven, shallow. Mine was calm. Then, quietly, I reached into the drawer and pulled out a printed screenshot of his profile, his photo, his bio, his conversations. I placed it on the table between us like a verdict. "This is who you are now," I said. He looked down at it, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then he said, almost pleading, "Can we start over?" I almost pitied him for asking. Almost. "No," I said. "Because you already started without me." The quiet that followed wasn't awkward. It was sacred. It was the sound of something ending cleanly without screaming. He looked at me one last time, waiting for a reaction that didn't come. When he finally left, the door didn't slam. It just clicked shut. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the sound of goodbye. When he left that night, I thought it would end there. But people like Mark never leave quietly. They circle back. Not out of love, but out of disbelief that you stopped orbiting them. The next morning, the knocking started. 3 hard raps on the door, the kind that sound more like demand than apology. I didn't move. I let him knock again, and again, until the rhythm faltered. Then came the voice. "Please, let me in. We can talk." I opened the door just enough for him to see that I wasn't crying. His eyes searched my face like he was looking for the woman who used to forgive him. She wasn't home. "Just 5 minutes," he said. "Please." I stepped aside, not out of kindness, but because I wanted to hear what kind of story he'd build this time. He started pacing, his hands flying as he spoke, that perfect balance of guilt and charm that once made me soft. I panicked. It didn't mean anything. I was just curious what people are like now. I never even met anyone. I studied him the way a scientist studies a failed experiment. "You were researching love, Mark? Is that it?" He sighed, rubbing his face. "I messed up, okay, but everything online, it's just noise. You and me, we're real." That word again. Real. I turned to the window, light cutting across my hands. Real isn't something you shop around for. You either protect it or you lose it. He walked closer, lowering his voice. "I can fix this." "You can't," I said. "You can only remember it." The silence stretched between us. Outside, someone's dog barked. Traffic hummed. The world moved on without hesitation. Then he said the one thing he shouldn't have. "You'll forgive me eventually." "You always do." It wasn't arrogance. It was certainty. He believed it the way some people believe the sun will rise. And maybe that was what broke whatever sympathy I had left. I turned to him fully. "You know what the worst part is? I almost did." He blinked. "Then why are you doing this?" "Because you made me believe in a version of us that didn't exist. And I'm tired of building my peace around your mistakes." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time, he looked small. Not broken, just human in a way he'd spent years avoiding. "I don't hate you," I said quietly, "but I can't love you for both of us anymore." He took a step forward, and I stepped back. "Don't," I said. "This isn't a pause, Mark. This is the part where it ends." The finality in my voice must have reached him, because he stopped. For a moment, all the charm drained out of his expression. He looked around the apartment. The photos, the plants, the traces of a life that was already dissolving, and something like regret flickered across his face. Then he nodded once, slowly, as if accepting a verdict he didn't think I was capable of delivering. "Okay," he whispered, "if that's what you want." "It's what's left," I said. He left the key on the counter. The sound of it against the wood was softer than I expected, but heavier somehow. When the door closed, I didn't cry. I just stood there, staring at the place where he'd stood, realizing that absence has its own kind of volume. The air felt lighter. Not empty, just honest. Later that night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the floor amid the quiet. The city lights blinked through the window, and for the first time in months, I could breathe without waiting for his next lie. I scrolled through my phone, the old photos, the messages, the promises frozen in text. I didn't delete them, not yet. I wanted to look at them one last time, to understand the distance between who he was and who I believed he was. Each picture felt like an artifact from another life. 2 smiling faces, unaware of the expiration date hiding in the corner. I closed the gallery and set the phone down. In the silence, something shifted. Not sadness, not even relief, just a deep, grounded knowing that I'd finally stepped out of the story he'd written for me. And when I looked around the room, everything seemed different. The same furniture, the same walls, but this time they belonged to me. The days after he left, didn't feel like freedom at first. They felt like silence, raw, unfamiliar silence that settled into the apartment like new furniture I hadn't asked for. Every room held the ghost of him, his shoes by the door, the indentation on his side of the bed, the mug he always forgot to rinse. But slowly, the ghosts began to fade. It wasn't a dramatic process. It was small, almost invisible. I started sleeping through the night again. The air stopped feeling like it belonged to someone else. I caught myself humming in the kitchen one morning and nearly laughed because it had been months since I'd done that. I threw out the mug first, then the toothbrush, then the framed photo of us by the window, the one where we were laughing under that ridiculous umbrella during our last vacation. It didn't even feel like anger, just practicality, removing clutter, making space for air. My friends called, worried. They'd seen my silence online, and silence, to them, always meant devastation. But when I finally met them for dinner, I surprised them. "You seem calm," one said carefully. "I am," I replied, and I meant it. I didn't tell them about the nights I still woke up reaching for him, or how sometimes, while walking home, I'd see a stranger's silhouette and mistake it for his. Healing isn't a clean break. It's a slow unlearning of habits that once felt like love. I kept expecting the pain to hit like a storm, but it came more like weather shifting, gray skies clearing without notice. I filled my days with small things: morning walks, new books, cooking for one. The sound of my own life began to return in fragments. One afternoon, I went to the park near our old place, the same bench where we used to sit on Sundays, pretending to plan a future. I sat there alone, watched people pass, families, couples, kids with sticky hands and loud laughter. And for the first time, it didn't hurt. It just was. The world kept moving, and I was part of it again. He texted me once, maybe 2 weeks later. "Hope you're okay?" I stared at the message for a long moment before deleting it. Not out of anger, out of understanding. He wasn't checking on me. He was checking if the door was still open. It wasn't. Instead, I bought a plant. A stupid, leafy little thing I wasn't sure how to take care of. It sat by the window where his photo used to be. Every morning I watered it, watched it lean toward the light. Something about that small ritual felt symbolic, like proof that growth could be quiet and still count. The loneliness didn't vanish. It just changed shape. It stopped feeling like emptiness and started feeling like space. Space to rebuild, to breathe, to exist without being reduced to someone else's mirror. I began writing again. At first, it was just fragments, sentences that started with "I remember" and ended with nothing. Then stories, essays, entire pages that had nothing to do with him. It felt like reclaiming language I'd forgotten I owned. And one evening, I caught my reflection in the dark window, hair loose, eyes tired but clear, and I realized I didn't recognize myself anymore. Not the woman he betrayed, not the woman who waited for apologies that never came, but someone new, someone who'd survived the lie without letting it define her. I poured myself a glass of wine, turned on the old record player, and let the music fill the apartment. It was the same song we used to dance to, but this time, it didn't belong to him. It belonged to me. That's the secret they never tell you about heartbreak. Sometimes it doesn't break you. Sometimes it clears the debris so you can finally see what's been waiting underneath all along. And for the first time in years, I wasn't counting the days since he left. I was counting the days since I came back to myself. A month later, I'd almost forgotten the sound of his voice. Almost. It's strange how memory works, how the things that used to make you ache start softening at the edges until they feel like scenes from a movie you barely remember watching. I could still picture him sometimes, standing by the kitchen counter, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly, humming under his breath. But now, when the image appeared, it didn't hurt. It just existed, like background noise fading into another life. I'd built a new rhythm by then. Morning jogs instead of shared breakfasts, podcasts instead of conversations. My apartment, once filled with two people's habits, had become entirely mine. The plants were thriving, the kitchen smelled like vanilla, and silence had stopped feeling like absence. Then one Saturday afternoon, I ran into him. Of course it was accidental. Betrayal always loved symmetry. He was at the farmer's market downtown, the same one we used to visit on Sundays. I spotted him before he saw me. He was standing by a stall of fresh flowers, smiling that same easy smile at the vendor. For a heartbeat, I froze. My body remembered the shape of old habits, how to look for his hand, how to move closer, but my mind didn't follow. When he finally noticed me, his expression shifted, surprise first, then hesitation, then the faintest glimmer of hope. He walked over, slower than usual, like approaching a wild animal that might bolt. "Hey," he said softly, "it's been a while." "Yeah," I answered, "it has." We stood there, surrounded by strangers and the smell of oranges and rain-soaked pavement. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "You look good," he said, voice tentative, as if testing the air. "Thanks," I paused. "You look like yourself." He laughed once, awkwardly. "That bad, huh?" "Just familiar," I said. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I've been thinking about you." I figured. "I know I can't undo what I did," he said, his eyes searching mine, "but I'd like to try to make things right. Maybe start over." For a moment, the world seemed to go quiet. Even the sounds of the market dimmed. I looked at him, the man who once promised forever, who taught me how easy words are to break, and I realized I felt nothing but calm. "I hope you do make things right," I said, "just not with me." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. "So that's it?" "That's closure," I said. I turned to leave, but stopped halfway and looked back. "You know, for what it's worth, I don't hate you. I just finally learned that love isn't proof of goodness. It's just potential. You had it, and you wasted it." He nodded, eyes glistening. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me." "I know," I said, smiling gently. "That's why you lost me." Then I walked away. The sunlight was sharp as I stepped outside the covered stalls, glinting off puddles, catching in my hair. The air smelled clean, almost new. I didn't look back, not once. That night, I cooked dinner for myself, poured a glass of wine, and ate by candlelight, not because I was lonely, because I was celebrating. It wasn't a special date, but it felt like one, the anniversary of my own freedom. I opened the window afterward, letting the city sounds drift in. Distant laughter, a car horn, someone playing guitar 2 floors down. All of it blending into something that sounded a lot like life moving forward. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't waiting for anything. No apology, no explanation, no closure that involved someone else. I already had it. The future didn't scare me anymore. It was wide, open, unwritten, and for the first time, it belonged entirely to me. It's funny how healing doesn't happen the way people promise it will. Everyone says time fixes things, like pain is a wound that scabs and disappears. But heartbreak doesn't fade. It transforms. It turns sharp edges into lessons, silence into peace, and the version of you that once begged for answers into someone who no longer needs them. Months had passed. The pieces of my life that once revolved around him had quietly rearranged themselves. Work, friends, small joys, all the things I used to fit around him had become the center again. I no longer woke up expecting the ache. It just stopped showing up. Sometimes I'd even forget it was ever there, until something, his favorite song playing in a cafe, a stranger's cologne on the bus, reminded me. But those memories didn't sting anymore. They just existed, like pages from a book I'd already finished reading. I'd grown into my solitude. It didn't feel empty. It felt expansive. There was a comfort in knowing I could fill silence with my own thoughts, laughter, music. I started traveling again. The first trip was small, a weekend by the coast. I sat on the sand, watching the tide crawl in and out, and realized I didn't need someone beside me to feel whole. The horizon was enough company. I thought about how he used to say we'd grow old together. I used to picture it, the two of us gray-haired, laughing at our younger selves. But sitting there, with the wind tugging at my hair and salt in the air, I finally understood something. We did grow old together, just not the way he promised. We grew old in different directions, out of each other's reach. Sometimes growth doesn't mean blooming side by side. It means breaking free from soil that can no longer hold you. I started seeing life differently after that. People, too. I stopped romanticizing effort that went one way. I stopped mistaking consistency for love. And I learned that stability without truth is just quiet betrayal. One afternoon, while cleaning, I found the old notebook where I'd written our plans, wedding ideas, travel lists, baby names we used to joke about. I almost threw it out, but instead, I kept one page. Grow old together. I folded it neatly and tucked it into a new journal, the one where I write only for myself now. A reminder that some dreams don't die, they evolve. Friends sometimes ask if I'd ever trust someone again. I tell them trust isn't about forgetting what hurt you, it's about remembering you survived it. That's the gift heartbreak gives you, clarity. It doesn't make you harder. It just makes you real. Now my mornings start with music instead of uncertainty. My nights end with gratitude instead of questions. I still believe in love, but not the kind that demands I lose myself to prove it. And when I look in the mirror, I don't see the woman who was betrayed. I see the woman who finally kept her own promise to never settle for almost. Because growing old together was never the goal. Growing whole on my own was. People always talk about betrayal like it's a fire, something that burns everything down in one violent flash. But it's not. It's slower, quieter. It starts with a spark you don't notice, then smolders in the corners of your life, until one day you look around and realize the air has changed. I used to think I'd never recover from what he did, that I'd carry it like a scar I'd have to explain forever. But healing isn't forgetting the pain. It's refusing to make it your identity. Now, when I pass the cafe where we used to sit on rainy mornings, I don't look away. I order my coffee, take the same corner table, and sit there alone. Not lonely, just present. The world looks sharper now. The small things, the quiet moments, the ordinary beauty that doesn't ask for permission to exist. Sometimes I wonder if he ever thinks about me, if he scrolls through old photos or rewrites our story in his head to make himself the hero. Maybe he does. Maybe he doesn't. Either way, it doesn't matter. Because the person I became after him isn't defined by the way he left. She's defined by the way she stayed true to herself when everything else fell apart. I learned that promises mean nothing without honesty, and forever is only as real as the effort behind it. Love isn't supposed to feel like monitoring someone's loyalty. Love isn't the anxiety of waiting for a phone to light up. Love isn't silence where truth should live. Real love feels like peace, not proof. If you've ever found yourself staring at someone you trusted and realizing they were already gone, please know this, you're not broken, you're just waking up. The heartbreak won't always feel this heavy. One day, it'll settle quietly into the background of who you are. Not a wound, but a compass. You'll look back and understand that what ended wasn't your story, just a chapter that taught you how to write the next one better. We don't grow old with everyone we love. Sometimes, we grow wiser without them. So if you've ever been promised forever by someone who couldn't even stay faithful for a moment, remember this, you didn't lose your future, you reclaimed your present. Has this ever happened to you? Share your story in the comments.